All right, good morning. Let's try it again. Good morning, everyone. Now, I just want to say, and apologies in advance for this, may the 4th be with you. You knew that was coming. So the indigenous people of Australia have a saying, you might have heard this, civilization is only 3 days deep. And what I take that to mean is that this manufactured lifestyle that we all enjoy is actually a little bit of an illusion. It's a little bit more fragile than we think. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If you were to start walking right now, by the end of day 3, you would have started to shed some of the reflexes of 20th century modernity that are actually not that helpful, and you would be sliding into some of the rhythms, some of the ancient rhythms that used to connect us to the land. And we have somebody here today that is going to help us get into that kind of headspace. If we had 3 days, we could try this experiment. We have an hour and change. But my hope is that by the end of it, we will have rewilded ourselves just a little bit. We will be hanging by our prehensile thumbs from our 7th principle, which is a commitment to the interconnected web of life of which we are all a part. So James MacKinnon is going to help us. He's going to be our guide today, and you're in for a real treat. He's going to blow your hair off. And I've known James for quite a while. So all you have to do from here on in is just enjoy, relax, think lofty thoughts about your place in the cosmos, and ask yourself, am I a mirror to reflect the world or a hammer to shape it? Well, we knew what Pete Seeger felt about that. And so let's sing along with Pete, if you dare, to get this going. All right, let's see if this mic works. Welcome again, everyone, to North Shore Unitarian Fellowship, where we take it as our mission to help each other live lives of depth, meaning, and purpose. My name is Bruce Grierson, and it's my privilege to be the front face of our Sunday services team this morning for this very earth-based service. Not quite on Earth Day, which was the original plan, but in the ballpark. And Earth Day is not a day; it's a season. It's a feeling. So we'll say it's appropriate. We meet here each Sunday, as you know, on the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, who modeled a way of thinking and living that's very much on point for us today. Best practices in this game called being human is to keep one eye upstream and one eye downstream, remembering where you came from and the consequences of your actions. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you haven't been to church for a while, I think you'll find that Unitarians do things kind of differently. And this place, North Shore Unitarian, really does things differently. So whatever brought you here, whether you tagged along with someone or heard about us somewhere, or you just Googled up spiritual but not religious, whatever your MO, we're glad you found us, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter what you do or who you love or who you voted for. We hope you feel safe and welcomed and elevated with us here this morning. Now, thank you, Karen. It's my pleasure to welcome up to the chancel Karen Funt. I want to say Karen needs no introduction. You've been with us on and off for half a century after all. Get to know somebody in that time a little bit. But here's something maybe you didn't know about Karen. She was super precocious. You tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but I don't think so. She was through undergrad by age 19, and 2 weeks later, she married Brian. Inconceivable. Not inconceivable that she married you, Brian, just that she got started on things so early. All right. And here's something else about Karen. A lot of people sort of accidentally fall into community, but Karen, you were very intentional about it. Early on, she says, I'm quoting you now, I decided I was relational and that it was messed up that our culture ingrains a lonely individualism. So you found your way back to us, and we're very grateful that you did. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering.
May the light of understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing
bring us peace. You can fire it up there if you want. You want to stay up with me for the other two candles?
Yes, sure.
All right. We have two more candles that we light here on Sunday mornings. Next one is a candle of joys and sorrows. Here's a joy. On Friday, Brian Bland turned 95. And where are you? There you are. And I should say, I meant to tell you, vital statistics called, and there's been an error on your birth certificate. You're actually only 65, just so we know. And so today, in honor of your birthday, there will be something special downstairs with the casseroles. All right, so that's that candle number 2. And then our third and final candle here this morning. So 13 days ago, Pope Francis died. Now, we are all Catholic, and I mean that with a small c, meaning universal in our tastes. Not many of us here are big C Catholic, a fair number of lapsed Catholics, but you have to work hard not to be at least a little bit on Team Pope Francis. He was as free of dogma as you can be and still be Catholic. His document on human fraternity for world peace and living together will be remembered 100 years from now. He led a humble and simple life by papal standards. He lived in a one-room apartment, drove a Ford Focus, and a Harley, actually. He stopped watching TV in 1990. And his encyclical on the environment, the first one ever, was strong stuff. He said, "We are all interconnected. Exploiting the earth for short-term profit doesn't just hurt the trees or rivers, it hurts us. And it hurts the poor and vulnerable disproportionately." So I'm going to invite you to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the loss of this human being and the courage he had to try to drag a dinosauric institution into the present-day world with its universal sufferings. Let's take a moment. Okay, I'm going to read a poem here. Somewhere there are the words for you to this, but I'll read it for you and you can just listen. It's called The Earthlings by Matthew Oldsman. Okay? There we go. The Earthlings arrived unannounced, entered without knocking, removed their shoes, and began clipping their toenails. They let the clippings fall wherever. They sighed loudly, as if inconvenienced. We were patient. We knew our guests were in an unfamiliar environment. They needed time to adjust. For dinner, we prepared turkey meatloaf with a side of cauliflower. This is too dry, they said. This is not like what our mothers made. We wanted to offer a tour of our world, demonstrate how we freed ourselves from the prisons of linear time. But the Earthlings were already spelunking our closets, prying tools from their containers and holding them to the light. What's this? They demanded. What's this? What's this? What's this? That's a quantum annihilator. Put that down. That's a particle grinder. Please put that down. We could show you how to heal the sick, we said. We could help you feed every nation, commune with that all-seeing sentient energy that palpitates through all known forms of matter. Nah, they said. Teach us to vaporize a mountain. Teach us to turn the moon into revenue. And then the Earthlings left a faucet running and flooded our basement. All right. With that, we're going to move into an introduction to... Is there a song before this? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, that's why you were waiting for. Okay, let's sing the song, and then we'll introduce James. There we go. So I want to share with you a diary entry I stumbled upon recently while looking for something else. This is from 8 or 10 years ago. Here's what I wrote to myself. I just want to live long enough to write James MacKinnon's obituary. Because at this point, I had I have been seeing the guy over the whole curve of his career, from his venturing into the underworld of the Dominican Republic to avenge his uncle's murder, to man-hauling a sledge across the Arctic for National Geographic magazine, to climbing El Capitan in Yosemite just for fun, to realizing his full potential as an environmental writer, planting his flag at the intersection of his own passions and the world's deep need. I think it was a bit fancy there for a journal entry, but maybe I thought I would have to read that one day. So there's a little bit of envy in there on my part, you can tell, and a lot of admiration. I still remember the day James walked into the newsroom at Monday Magazine in Victoria as the new environmental reporter. You were 24 years old, James. I was sitting over there in the corner, goofing off as the arts editor. 30 years later, I think it's safe to say, James has fulfilled his promise. If you Google him now, he comes up as public figure, author of 5 great books, adjunct professor at UBC where he teaches feature writing. He's written for The New Yorker and The Atlantic, and featured in Best American Science and Nature writing anthologies. But I think of James as a bit of a prophet, because there are so many ways in which he has been ahead of the curve. The book most people know him for is this one, 100 Mile Diet. How many people have heard of this or read it? Most, I would say. Which launched the worldwide meme, the challenge to eat local, all your food grown or harvested within 100 miles of where you live. And he and Elisa, his partner, did that for a year, including harvesting their own salt from the ocean to put on their dinner. So that book spun off into a TV show that made James a little bit famous. And then there was this book. Nobody had heard of the idea of rewilding, the idea that maybe the next level beyond taming the world is untaming it a bit, restoring some of it to the state it was in before we got our grubby hands on it. Now this is talked about seriously as a different kind of environmentalism, kind of the flip side to the conservation movement, where we put animals in zoos and trees in parks. So there are a lot of different directions we could go this morning, because there's a lot of dimensions to James's environmentalism, but the one I want to focus on is his identity as a culture jammer, a crusader against the great churning machine of consumer capitalism and how we've eagerly bought in. Basically, our modern Western lifestyles put a lot of pressure on the planet to the point where something's got to give. And that's something he's written about so incisively in this book, which asks, is another way to live possible? Might it save our bacon, and might it even make us happier in the bargain? So this book, which was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award, took you, James, to some far-flung corners of the world to investigate those questions, and it's going to be our treat this morning to tag along with you on a tour to some of those places. Please help me welcome the one and only J.B. James MacKinnon.
Thank you, sir.
Meeting for the first time.
That's right.
Hold these chairs out and give it between two ferns kind of thing.
All right.
I'll sit here. You sit that one. We'll kind of have these facing us a bit. There.
Perfectly natural. Right, yeah. No. I like this couch.
Now we're back on this one, yeah? So James, I got to confess, when about 6 or 7 years ago, I asked what you were working on, and you said, well, it's a book about consumerism and how, there should be less of it. And I thought, all right, Captain Obvious, good luck with that. But this book is so fascinating and so counterintuitive that I guarantee everybody will be, if not talking about it at dinner, some element of it at dinner tonight, or at least thinking about it. I think, James, this is the book you were born to write. So let's dive in. Before we get to our first destination, though, on the tour, I wonder if you can give us a hint of how it is that you came to be a kind, like, as long as I've known you, you've been kind of a culture jammer in your mind and wanting to live a simple life. Where did that all begin for you?
Oh, I mean, like most things, I guess it began at home in a few different ways. I'm really trying to think of like what there's sort of some obvious starting points of it. I do remember one time picking up Henry David Thoreau's book, Walden, and there was something in it that spoke to me in such a way that I cleaned my room. I think I was about 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And I read it, and this sort of appeal to the simple life struck me in, powerfully enough that as a 12-year-old, I promptly went and tidied my room. Kind of a Marie Kondo type reaction, decluttered my room. Mm-hmm. But also, weirdly, at that point, the back of the door to my room, the side facing into the room, I had covered with all of these sort of mostly political messages. We were quite a political family. And I also stripped all of those off as sort of I would have to think of that as sort of the origin moment, because I was clearing my space and I was clearing my head.
Mm-hmm. You didn't want anyone to tell you what to think. You had your own thoughts.
Yeah, I saw in that sort of message of simplicity also an opportunity for a kind of autonomy. I still think that.
Nice. So we're going to be talking a bit about materialism as an idea, and that being kind of one of the problems of Western culture, materialism run amok. How do you define it?
That has evolved over time, but I think the most useful definition of materialism is the one that I borrow from the field of psychology, and that's simply that materialism is a set of values that orients itself around possessions and wealth and status. And I think that's a nice, relatively neutral way of approaching the idea of materialism. And then once you dive into that, you can see how powerfully that particular set of values is currently expressed in the society we live in. And it also kind of fencing it off like that helps us understand that there is a set of values outside the fence.
When when we introduced you in the e-bulletin blog, I called you a practitioner of solutions journalism, and I think you are, and I would define that as someone who not only just gives you the bad news about the world, but says here are some good things that you should consider that are actually working in some ways. So with that in mind, you went to how many cities, towns and places on earth did you go to while researching this book?
I don't even really know, but 4 continents, 5, every continent except Antarctica actually on this book.
Wow.
Yeah, to research the book. So yeah, a lot of wandering. Well, what I was trying to do, as you indicated, just setting out to say maybe we consume too much. For one thing, that had been done. There are lots of books out there, starting with Thoreau, that have sent that kind of a message. What I was trying to do in the book was find living expressions of it in real life. And unfortunately, because we live in a world that very powerfully orients itself around materialist values, it's the world's most difficult Easter egg hunt to find these places where you could find an alternative to materialism that's being expressed so fully that it's worth digging into deeply. And so that's why I think I ended up having to leap around the entire globe to piece together some sense of what it might look like to live along different lines.
Mm-hmm. You speak very good Spanish and have for a long time, and I think that might have been a factor in why you chose the first place we're going to go to here, Ecuador. But it's not the only reason, obviously. Tell us why Ecuador?
Well, one thing I wanted to do, there's a statistic that probably a lot of you will have heard, which is that if everyone on Earth lived like the average American, or increasingly the average Canadian, then we would need 5 planets worth of resources, natural resources, to deliver that kind of lifestyle, our kind of lifestyle, to all of those people. I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, whose lifestyle would we have to look at if we wanted to, what is that country where if you go to it, if we all lived like the people in that country, we'd only need 1 planet. That would seem to be the other side of the coin. So I looked into that. Of course, there's all kinds of different countries where people are consuming, far less than, at a level at which if everybody lived like them, we'd be well under the amount of natural resources that we use. But a lot of those people are living in pretty desperate situations. So I was trying to find this sweet spot where if we all lived like the people in country X, we would be living sustainably in terms of the world's natural resources, but we'd also be living at a high level of development. So we'd have access to good education, good health care, we'd have long lifespans, and we'd have some of the pleasures of life. There's a few of those countries, a handful, and the one I chose was Ecuador. So Ecuador, at that time, was that kind of a place. It also, at that time, had this word that we see up here, buen vivir. They had a minister of buen vivir, which is essentially the minister of the good life. And his task was to try to help Ecuadorian citizens understand what the makings of an actually happy life are. Difficult task, as it turns out. But I went down to Ecuador.
How would you define buen vivir? It's more than happiness, isn't it? It has other elements to that phrase.
Yeah, a lot of people consider it untranslatable, but it is, buen vivir is just this whole collection of aspects of life that give it meaning and quality and support contentment and satisfaction. So it's easier maybe to understand through looking at the life of somebody who believes that they have buen vivir. And actually, I have this really fresh in my mind right now, not from Ecuador, but from Spain. I've just returned from Spain. And one thing, I was staying in a pretty small town and village in Spain, and I was really surprised talking to the residents of that town by how many of them would say to me, we have a really good quality of life. They really, I feel like I probably go a decade at a time in between interactions with Canadians where they say to me, I've got a really good quality of life, It's just not something that comes up in normal conversation. It came up all the time in this village in Spain, and what they were talking about was they would specify, we don't work too much, we spend a lot of time hanging out with each other, and we eat good food. And those seem to be the essential elements in Spain. It's beautiful to see in a place like Ecuador that you can have those things, have a high standard of living, and be living in a really deeply sustainable way. It seemed like a good starting point for the book, really, was to see what a sustainable level of consumption at a high level of development looks like right now on planet Earth. Because I think we spend a lot of time in countries like Canada and the United States imagining how technology can give us this sustainable life in the future, right? But that didn't seem like the right starting point for me. The right starting point seemed to me to be who's doing this right now and what does it look like?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to ask you to keep buen vivir in the back of your mind as we go to the next stop. I don't know if we have this chronologically the way that you actually went on your tour, but that was a market in Ecuador.
Oh, in Ecuador, yeah.
Pachamama Festival, maybe?
Right, okay.
Okay, so the next place, I want you to help us know, how did you choose? So we've heard of the Bushmen of the Kalahari. They're still a community that exists and people visit them, and you visited them. How did you choose this stop on the tour, and what were you hoping to learn there, and how'd you get access to them?
Well, when I started working on this book, one of the first things that I heard from, like, I'd talk to people, anybody I was talking to, and I'd say, I'm writing this book about consumption, materialism, overconsumption, and a lot of people would say, yeah, there's no way out. Human beings are hardwired for this. If you give us more money, then we buy more stuff. It's just the way we are. And so I wanted to confront that aspect of it right away. So I went and talked to some anthropologists, and they just said, that's fundamentally not true. There are all kinds of examples through history and in the present day of societies that consume less, do not orient their societies around materialistic values. And I said, well, tell me where to go, and they said, go hang out with the Bushmen of the Kalahari. Who, by the way, of course, don't call themselves the Bushmen of the Kalahari, but they speak a click language, one of those languages, well, all those kinds of sounds. So they don't mind if we refer to them as the Bushmen of the Kalahari in the absence of our ability to speak click language.
What would they call themselves?
The people that I hung out with were called the Jukwazi. The Jukwazi.
Okay.
And this guy, his name is Gitcow. That's the best I can do. I'm just going to call him Gitcow if he comes up. So I headed off to Namibia, and some anthropologists had sort of kindly paved the way for me to go and talk to people there. And the Bushmen of the Kalahari, in this case, in this area, have lived in, their culture has survived in that specific place for 120,000 years. And throughout that time, really hasn't changed a lot. So the first things that an outsider from a country like ours would notice going to spend time with the Bushmen is they have very few possessions, very, very few possessions, far fewer than they could easily produce off the landscape they live on. They don't really accumulate wealth, and they police status. So they have really particular cultural practices that are aimed at making sure that nobody's status level in society raises too high.
So if I'm gathering too much food or hunting too much food, what happens to me?
Well, two different things will happen. One is insulting the meat. So this is a term that's applied to sort of any kind of attempt to set yourself above others, I suppose. But what always happens, in fact, the hunters go out, they have a successful hunt, and they bring back meat for the village. When they come back, they don't come back to people going, "Thank you, mighty hunter." They come back to people saying, "This is all you brought us? This kudu? I saw a larger kudu than this 2 days ago." And it's called insulting the meat. And the idea is to, they see the hunters come back celebrating, they're full of pride, and the first thing the community wants to do is remind them, you're just part of the community. You've fulfilled your role in the community, that's good. We all do different things for the community. And they just gently, well, not so gently actually, they bring people back down to earth and remind them in that particular way that everybody plays their part, and they are just some of the people who play a particular role. The other thing that you can do, suppose somebody did think that they were the mightiest hunter and that therefore their family deserved the biggest cuts or what have you, and started to stash meat away. Then there's a practice called demand sharing, in which everyone in the community understands that if somebody is accumulating more than others, they have the right to go and ask for some. So they can just go and say, I see that you have more meat than everyone else. I could use some, and you are required to give it to me.
Required by the code of the...
By the code of the Bushmen, yeah. So they have this practice of demand sharing, and it's really well understood that if you are asked, if someone comes to you and asks, then you must share. So those are a couple of the practices that, as I say, kind of police against, gaps in wealth, essentially, and which flatten status in the society.
Last time you and I were having lunch, I asked if you thought something like demand sharing could scale up or translate into a culture like ours. And your answer was something like, it may be a bit too radical to think we could jump into an arrangement like that, but something more reasonable as a kind of baby step in that direction was this next place we're going to go, Helsinki. So tell me a bit about how you chose Helsinki and what you learned there.
Yeah, so Helsinki, well, Finland in general is an example of a country where what I wanted to look for was, well, you have various kinds of rich country in the world. Are there rich countries that consume less, or where there's less pressure to consume than other countries? And again, through research, it emerged that Finland might be a good place to go and look at that question. One of the people I met with there was a woman named Anu Partanen, and she wrote a book, which I recommend, called The Nordic Theory of Everything. And one of the origin point for her writing that book is that she grew up in Finland, lived in Finland as an adult, and then decided to try her hand at New York City. So she moved to New York City and tried to work as a writer there, and eventually returned home to Finland. The reason that she eventually moved home to Finland was because she realized after moving to New York City that she was feeling worse, just a lot worse about who she was, a lot worse about whether she was succeeding, a lot less, she used the word safe a lot. She felt a lot less safe in New York City, and not in the sense of crime, but in the sense of a feeling of personal security about how she was going to live in the future, how she was going to afford to pay her rent and put food on the table next year and the year after that. So she described this to me and talked about how she didn't really talk too much about Finland and how it felt when she grew up there, but when she arrived in New York, she noticed she had never seen poverty like this, not only in Finland, but in all of Europe. So she said it had the effect of making her feel like, if I don't succeed in this country, I can go there. There's essentially no floor. You step into the elevator shaft here, and you just fall. You can fall a long ways in a way that you couldn't in Finland. She realized that you couldn't really, even though a lot of people looked like they had sort of the same resources, she would often discover that there were huge disparities in resources. So her kids were going to a school, and she'd be like, why do some parents always seem to be able to provide so much more for their kids or donate so much more to the school? And then she realized that some of the people who dressed like her and drove cars like her had family wealth and trusts and things like this, that they were actually much, much, much richer than she was. And she just found it ground her down over time. And finally she's like, I think life might be better in Finland. Not coincidentally, she had just had a new baby, and she and her partner moved to Finland. And she just said she just felt all of that just disappear. In Finland, because they have a very strong, they're a strong social democratic nation. A very important value in Finland is that as a nation, they don't get to a place where one where each person does not recognize the way of life of everybody else. So they really feel it's important that people share kind of a similar bandwidth of lifestyle and opportunity, because then you can always kind of meet the eye of everybody around you. So maybe an easy way to describe this is, she said to me, in Finland you can have one Ferrari, but you can't have 10 Ferraris. So you're allowed to have a little more wealth than other people, but rich people actually complain in Finland that they're not able to sort of express their wealth because people won't admire them for it. They'll kind of tut them, right? They'll say like, no. In Finland we don't do that. We don't show off our wealth. And a lot of that has roots not only in their social democratic history, but in a terrible depression that they had in the 1990s. And ever since that their understanding of that depression is that it emerged from a great expansion in the gap between rich and poor that opened up in the 1980s, and that caused the collapse of their society essentially in the 1990s. So a lot of people who remember that, it reinforced their older social democratic values for another generation, basically. And they're still very protective of that idea.
There's so many things to say about social democracies, but this is interesting too. Where is this in Finland? This is the picture you supplied, and I thought it's a weird metaphor in some ways. There's the endless elevator shaft of New York City, plus the flatter level of a social democracy.
A local park in Helsinki.
Okay.
Finland as a whole, a lot of it looks like it was built by gnomes. This kind of thing is, I love the architecture and a lot of integration of I think what this really captures for me is how they integrate human culture into their natural environment in these really beautiful ways. And this stairwell really captures that. It's one of these weird circumstances where I think the human touch adds to the beauty of the natural environment.
I got one eye on the clock. Hey, Lila, do you mind going down and putting a bug in Diane's ear that we're going to be running about 10 minutes over, and she can keep an eye on those casseroles? She doesn't like when the casseroles cool on us. Okay, yeah. So let's jump to the next place. Now, I think this is my favorite part of the book. It's such an interesting idea of utori that you discovered here. Tell us about Sado Island.
Yeah, so Sado Island is a place that is experiencing degrowth, and it's experiencing degrowth because its population is shrinking. A lot of Japan's national population is shrinking. Sado Island has lost 50% of its population, and therefore about 50% of its economy in the last while. And so, as a community, they've had to change dramatically. They were 40 years ago, they were a tourist hotspot. They had big resorts and spas and these kinds of things, really bustling kind of vacation land. And now it's a very quiet island with a low population. And so in a lot of ways they reflect what a lower consuming society might be like, or what a society that isn't built on the idea that ever more consumption will drive the economy. They don't have that option anymore. And what Sado Island has begun to attract is Japanese who are looking for this idea of utori. And utori, the best translation I have found of it is breathing space. And the Japanese use it to mean breathing space in a whole bunch of different ways. It can literally mean breathing space. It can literally mean like get out of the cramped city and go breathe some air in the countryside. It can mean I've got a little breathing space in my finances. I can pay my bills and And I've got a little extra for the next month, so I feel a bit safer again, I guess the word is. But a lot of it is breathing space in the sense of being able to hear your inner voice. I think that's one of the most important ways that Yutori is translated. And so in Sado Island, you meet people like, I met a woman who had been a dental assistant in Tokyo for 20 years, struggling to make ends meet, felt like the job was very stressful. Everyone she knew was stressed out. She wanted Yutori. She moved to Sado Island. And the life that she had built really resembles what I think life might look like for a lot of people in a lower consuming society. She still worked in the cash economy. What she did was grow very, very, very high quality rice. So that was enough. She worked in the cash economy. She had quite a simple life. So she didn't need a ton of money. So she didn't have to work too hard. Because she didn't have to work too hard, she was able to focus on doing something at a high level of excellence. So she grows great rice. She takes a lot of satisfaction from the quality of the product she produces. And then a good portion of her life is taken up with self-sufficiency, but not in the American prepping for the apocalypse sense of the term. Self-sufficiency for her includes relationships with other people, so that if she needs to send her kid off for care with somebody else, she's got somebody she can do that with. She grows some of her own food. She was fermenting her own soy sauce while I was there. It was amazing, soy sauce. So yeah, this balance, this much more kind of balanced life where a lot of your needs are being met through your relationships with people in your community, partially through your own efforts, partially through a small amount of participation in small or a lesser, I guess, and really meaningful engagement with the cash economy, and a lot of Yutori. That's the good life for her.
As you talked about Yutori, what came out for me was this dimension of if I have some slack in the line with my life, I have I have more availability for you or people that I come in contact with. I'm not so rushed that I don't have time for you, which is so often the way in the West.
This is such an interesting thing because one of the things I noticed as part of this book, of course, I'm traveling around the world and I'm meeting all of these people, many of whom are living or trying to live at a little bit simpler level. And one of probably the most distinguishing feature of my conversations with those people was time. You're a journalist, I'm a journalist, and you probably noticed the same thing as me, which is it's getting harder and harder to get a little piece of people's time to talk to you about whatever it is you're pursuing journalistically. A lot of kind of calls where people are like, okay, yeah, I can fit you in 22 days from now for 20 minutes. My conversations with people who are practicing sort of simpler living are not like that. One of them in Barcelona lasted, I think, 7 hours, And people would come to these conversations, like, I was talking to people practicing voluntary simplicity down in Seattle. They were showing up. They had done some journaling the night before. I mean, they were ready to talk and think and go deep. This thing in Barcelona went through 3 different meals, like well into the night. It's a really different relationship with time, and it's the making of that time that allows you, so much deeper of a human connection.
There's one more stop on our tour, but I think we're going to have to skip it because this is so interesting too. But I want you to, how about this? I'm going to ask you. There was the final page and a half of James's book I was going to have him read because I find it quite stirring. We can do one or the other. We can have him read, or we can talk for 3 minutes about this borough in London, which is extremely poor, but you found quite a bit of magic there. Yeah, exactly. You pointed out the irony of being squeezed. Like, let's do this borough in London then.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. How did you end up there? And
This is the poorest borough in London. It's called Barking and Dagenham. And I was attracted to it because there's an experiment going on there called Participatory City. And what they did, this street, which looks, it's a typical street in Dagenham, with various shops in a row. What you can't see in this photo is that one of those shops is a storefront into a shop that doesn't sell anything. It's set up as a shop, it's called a shop, but if you walk into it, what's available, rather than goods for sale, is opportunities to have experiences in your community and to interact with your community. So you walk in and there will be, the goal I believe was to have people have 20 or 30 opportunities a week to do things with other people in their community. What really struck me, the thing that struck me most in Barking and Dagenham is that I sat in the shop for a couple days actually, and I watched people come in and they would sign up for things. Some of them were coming in for the first time. And so I started asking people, you just signed up for this, or you just participated in this workshop on making stew, or what would you have been doing if you weren't doing these experiences, these workshops? And I thought they would say, and I thought it would be perfect for my book, because I thought they'd say, oh, I would have been shopping, or I would have been taking my kids to McDonald's, or we would have been going to a fun park or something. But no, we're having these deep human experiences
You
instead.
were meaning, what would you do if you had had the money to do these other things?
No, I was just saying, like, what would you be doing with your time?
Okay, right.
Yeah. And I thought it would just be like, I'd be doing consumerist things, but no, I'm doing non-consumerist things. What they replied was almost universally, they said, I'd be doing nothing, because it's a very poor neighborhood. It made me realize, in a consumer society, if you don't have the money to participate in the festival of consumption, then there's nothing much to do, particularly in a place like this. I mean, there's not much in the way of parks or, there's nothing much other than shops and restaurants. And if you don't have the money for that, then you're just out. And I realized how much that probably drives the so-called epidemic of loneliness, because you would really see that open up. The changes, I'll just give 3 very quick examples of what things I overheard. A woman came in and told a story about how she'd been walking down the street and saw some kids in like black hoodies walking down the street, and she got this kind of immediate fear, worried about her safety. And then she said she got a little closer and she realized, oh, it's just those 3 kids. We were all at a community dinner together, the weekend previous, and she was just relaxed, felt safe. Everybody said kind and happy hellos to each other. You could see how incredibly powerful that moment was for her, realizing that having connections into her community just instantly made her feel dramatically more protected. That was one. The next one was an older couple that came in, and they said, we saw in a pamphlet that you have like Tech Tuesdays. Our grandkids or kids, they gave us these cell phones. We have no idea what to do with them. Can Tech Tuesday help me do this? The answer was yes. And again, this woman, she was just so relieved that there was, through the community, a path to changing this thing that had obviously been weighing on them for months, if not even years. And the last one was a young woman, tween age, probably 12 or so, came in, just kind of said, what's going on here? And they said, well, this. We have chickens. and she was like, you have chickens? And the next thing you know, she was in the back and she was actually getting to pet chickens, and it was as though, I think I say in the book, it was as though they had told her that Harry and Meghan were in the back room. We have chickens in the back, and she could not have been more thrilled. So yeah, these little opportunities to participate, I watched them come in and they were just like hitting me like emotional bombs. Like it was there, of all of the places I visited, that I came like the closest to tears, just from watching these peoples walk in this door and have their world open wide.
It was that moment when they suddenly were delighted by an opportunity they didn't know they had. Was that it?
Yeah, so they were going from isolation and exclusion to community and participation, and the impact of it was 10 times more, 100 times more immediate than I would have expected.
It's an amazing part of the book. I'm going to, by the way, James has a few copies of this, I think, after, and downstairs people, if they're interested, can pick one up from him. I just wanted you to close off with this, almost from the very end of the book. It's about one page, and then...
Sure. There's just one little thing I have to explain very briefly before I do the reading, just so it makes sense. And that is I went gathering with the Bushmen, with the women of the Bushmen, and we went out gathering these sort of wild potatoes and other wild vegetables. And what struck me was that we headed out, it was very relaxed, and then they picked some. There was a lot of wild potatoes out there when we went out. And I was shocked because they just stopped at a certain point and headed back. And I was like, it's wild potato season, you know, like, get all the wild potatoes, people. And that was not how they saw it. They just were like, no, we just get enough for dinner. And we go in. And it's something anthropologists call running below capacity. So I was struck by my own reaction to that, how I was like, come on, you know, I don't think of myself as a deeply materialistic person, but I was like, the potatoes, they're ripe. Okay. What the research actually showed is that as the world's kaleidoscope of cultures engaged with the global consumer economy, consumerism was proving to be far from inevitable. Some cultures consumed a great deal, others very little. Some consumed collectively, others privately. Some put materialism at the heart of their societies, and others on the periphery. What did seem to be the case, however, is that consumer culture, as most of us know it, is an increasingly powerful force. It thrives in situations of instability and contradiction, on social disruption and individual mobility, Wilk said. He's an anthropologist. It's hard to miss the fact that these conditions define the current world order. Consumer culture creates the circumstances that create consumer culture. The Juhuanzi are not stuck in the past. Instead, it seems they look at the world around them today, a world of instability and disruption, and see, as they always have, a precarious place to live. It is a place where, maybe more than ever, it remains important to make ourselves vulnerable to each other. As so quickly became clear during the pandemic, when a random disease was allowed to hurt some far more than others through no fault of their own, if we give up on each other when the going is good, it can be hard not to do the same when the going gets tough. For all their struggles, there's a sense among the Juhuanzi that they have the fundamentals right. With horizon dipping into the golden yoke of the sun, a big pot of food is on the fire in Duampos. That's where I did the gathering. Already, the children are eating roasted beetles as an appetizer. The whole village now is together on the blankets, aloft in conversation and laughter. Loneliness here seems impossible. Almost every person is in physical contact with at least one other. Legs across legs, hands on shoulders, children across laps, backs leaned against backs. The mood is so festive, in fact, that I begin to wonder, is this a special gathering, unusual for some reason? The young woman whom I ask looks confused by my question. She pauses to take in the scene. No, she replies at last, this is the normal way. Maybe she's right. Maybe it is. Perhaps 150,000 years after the day the world stops shopping, the rest of us will have come to the same conclusion. Above all, we need each other. A simpler life leads to a still simpler one, and a simpler one after that, until we gradually relearn how to live in such a way that, even if we discover how to make our resources infinite, we might find we don't want to consume every last thing. What will our current age of consumption look like then? A misstep, a puzzling failure to return to normal. a moment of disconnection before we rejoined the long timeline of human history, and in so doing, gave ourselves a future.
I think that's a good place to stop. James, thank you for making some of you Tory for us today, and having some slack in the line to communicate with us. Okay, that's a beautiful setup for our hymn, and Marcia's going to tell you why this hymn was chosen. It's cool.
Come up while I'm just sharing a few comments with you. So I'm the last one to tell you how you should experience a work of art. But there's a few things about this next piece that we thought you might benefit from knowing first. First, the title, Hymn to Axiom. Axiom is the name of a company whose slogan is, "We put data to work so that brands can realize the greatest value from data and technology." The composer, Vienna Teng, studied computer science and worked for tech companies in Silicon Valley. So she knows the inside story of the algorithms that convert our random clicks into what biz school professor Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism. Vienna Teng, who began piano lessons at the age of 5, wrote this piece in 2014. A bit before psychologists began to raise the alarm about mental health disorders rising, along with the use of social media on smartphones. She tells an audience at one of her live shows that she wanted to write this piece from the point of view of an electronic device or an AI program working on behalf, these are my words, of its corporate masters. That's just one level of irony here. A voice openly admitting to manipulation of consumers set to what you're going to hear as beautiful choral harmonies that sound to me almost liturgical. And you might not be able to hear all the wordplay because we're going to be singing different words at different times. For instance, just one example, the sopranos will sing, "You don't have to hide," and the altos are going to be chanting, "You don't have," reminding us that we just might be missing out on something we don't even know why we're yearning for it. So this may not be the only time you listen to this song, but we just wanted you to have a little of that in mind before we sing it for you.
Thank you. Our outreach recipient this month is the Wild Bird Trust of BC. They're the stewards of Maplewood Flats, a protected bird sanctuary and education center here on the North Shore that many of you have visited. They work in partnership with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation to maintain a management plan. It's a great charity. Please give as generously as you are able. The ushers, please take the collection. For all you do, for all you give, for all your efforts to muster up buen vivre and utori and make time for each other and make time for this place, we thank you. Okay, I'm going to rip through the announcements here. We have Resiliency Garden notice here. Please sign up to plant. Jean has put in the first tree already. 55 more to go. It's going to be awesome, but it needs your help. You can sign up in the hallway outside the fireside room or let Jean know you're coming. Also today, Jean will be giving a garden brief out by the garden. Maybe pop in there. I know I've pushed you a little bit on this. There's also the art people are being invited by Allison to come up after you've had some casserole. And oh, it's next week. Oh, good. So there's no conflict there. I thought there might be some fisticuffs. But there is a meeting of the environment group up here in the chancel. What's that? Yeah, okay, so but hosted by you. But anyone can come back up here and now that you've been primed to think about the environment. There's an emergency preparedness event coming up. Sorry, I'm all over the place here. And you no longer have to sign up for that in advance. Just show up if you're interested. Brian's cake is going to be available downstairs. Come celebrate his birthday with him. And there's an upcoming, I should just watch. There we go. The Waz, an amazing 6-part band locally here, are going to be playing some late Beatles music. It's going to be great. Tickets are available. Next week, I'm up again. The power of people who believe in you. This is going to be a very story-filled service about the people in our life who just show up for us. And that is it. Shall we close her down here? Oh, we're going to skip the congregational hymn. And okay, so let me hasten you into the next phase, which is eating. But I will just say. Here's my final thought for you. We need a better word than happiness for where this ends up. We need a better word for happiness. This 250,000-year human experiment on planet Earth, what is the better word for that? Well, what is the word that captures where we're going? Maybe it's eutori, the idea of keeping a little slack in the line. Maybe it's buen vivere, the idea of living in harmony with one another. Maybe it's ubuntu, I don't make sense without you. But I nominate the word paradox. The thing that we're looking for is the flip side of what our culture tells us we're supposed to be looking for. Instead of more stuff, richer experiences. Instead of entitlement, service. Instead of solitude and isolation, beloved community. Instead of God is dead, mystery is alive. Let's put out the light just for today. We extinguish this flame. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and purpose. Thank you to everybody who made this service possible. Thank you for indulging me for going a little over time today. Thank you especially to James MacKinnon for joining us today and for all the good work that you do. And let's circle around.